Some letters don't get lost, they're hidden, because the truth inside them doesn't just change a life, it burns everything around it. The letter had been written exactly 20 years ago. The handwriting was careful, almost shy, the kind of penmanship used when someone's trying to say something for the last time. It was sealed with 2 initials, JS, and it never reached its destination. Until now, Elias had never been curious about his past. At least, not in a dangerous way. He had grown up with his mother, Hande, a respected lawyer in Seville, and that was enough, or so he thought. The day the letter appeared, it wasn't inside a box, or a drawer, or a forgotten book. It arrived in an anonymous envelope. No sender, no postmark, just his name, handwritten. Inside, a letter, yellowed by time, and one sentence that would shatter everything. I should have fought harder to be your father, but I was told you didn't exist. Julian Sancilias Frosa. He had never heard that name in his life. When he confronted his mother that night, she didn't lie, but she didn't tell the whole truth. Either Julian was someone I cared for deeply, she said, avoiding his eyes. So he's my father? No. Or, maybe, I don't know. What do you mean, you don't know? Hande took a deep breath. I was with him, and shortly after, I was with Kerem. That name hit harder. Kerem Aslan Elias had grown up knowing him as the friend who disappeared, the Turkish businessman who helped fund Hande's legal career when Elias was still a baby. But Elias had never met him. He had never questioned why. Now, he had too. Meanwhile, in a hotel in Malaga, a man reread the same letter from 20 years ago. His hands were shaking. Kerem had kept the original copy. He had written it just before leaving Spain, on the same day he found out Hande was pregnant and then gone. Or rather, was made to leave. He has my eyes, Kerem whispered, looking at a photo someone had slipped under his door. It was a printout from social media. Elias, now 20 years old, a boy who looked nothing like Julian, but everything like him. That night, Elias opened his laptop and typed in, "Who was Julian Scenes?" What he found was simple, a small obituary, dated 2005, a name, a date, a cause of death, heart failure, a career, pediatrician, and one sentence that stood out. He dedicated his life to others, but left with a story untold. Elias knew that story was him. Some truths are heavy, others are radioactive. And when a letter travels 2 decades to find you, it's not a coincidence, it's a reckoning. Sometimes the hardest part isn't telling the truth, it's looking into the eyes of the person you lied to, and realizing they look just like the one you hid it from. Dawn in Seville arrived like a lie, soft, quiet, and pretending nothing had changed, but everything had. Hande had been awake long before the sun. She hadn't slept. Not really. She had rehearsed this moment for 2 decades, but now that Elias had read the letter, nothing felt under control. She walked into the kitchen and found him already there. Elias was no longer a boy. He was 21, tall, calm on the outside, but with eyes full of fire. Eyes that didn't just ask questions, they demanded answers. Who was that man in the photo? He asked, not looking up from his untouched coffee. Hande hesitated. An old business partner, a business partner or my father. The mug nearly slipped from her hands. Hospital room. Hande holds a newborn Elias in her arms. At her side is her best friend, Cristina Marquez. Are you going to tell Kerem? Cristina asked. Nervous. No, I'm not sure. What happened with Julian? It was only once, a mistake. And now it's too late. What if Kerem never forgives you? Then he'll hate me. But I'd rather be hated for what I hide than abandoned for what I reveal. She sealed the secret that night, but secrets, like old letters, always find their way back in the present. Elias sat in his university library, pretending to read. His mind was elsewhere. He searched the name online again. Kerem Aslan. Photos, interviews, headlines, Turkish, entrepreneur, producer, investor. One image caught his breath. Kerem, holding a child in his arms, years ago. A child who wasn't him, but who looked disturbingly familiar. Meanwhile, Christina Marquez walked into Han's office uninvited. Still sharp, still perfect, still cold. "He's back," Christina said. Han didn't flinch. "What do you want?" "Christina, Kerem came to my office. He wants answers. About the boy." Han turned slowly toward her. "What did you tell him?" Christina smiled, thin, cruel. "That I didn't know. That it was your secret to reveal, or your burden to bury." That evening, Elias received an unexpected message from an anonymous number. "You deserve the truth. Meet me, AA, in a quiet cafe near the Triana Bridge." Kerem waited. Hande arrived first. "Did you talk to him?" Kerem asked without preamble. "Yes, he asked if you were his father, and I lied." Kerem exhaled, not in surprise and disappointment. "I asked him to take a DNA test. He said he'd think about it." "What will you do if he's not your son?" Kerem didn't blink. "I'll still be the man who would have loved him anyway." That night, Elias sat alone in his room. He looked at the envelope containing the test kit. Next to it, a note from Kerem. "Blood doesn't make a father, but truth makes a man. You decide." He stared at it for a long time, not because he didn't want to know, but because he wasn't sure he'd survive what the answer would take from him. The silence after the fire is the loudest of all, and once a son begins to question the name he carries, nothing remains untouched. The moment before the truth arrives is worse than the truth itself, because the waiting isn't silence, it's a scream you keep swallowing over and over again. Elias stood in the pharmacy aisle longer than anyone ever should, not because he didn't know which test to buy. He already had one at home. He just didn't want to walk out with it, because walking out meant walking in to a truth that might detonate everything behind him. The pharmacist looked at him with polite disinterest. Another young man with questions about his past. Nothing unusual, but for Elias it wasn't biology he feared, it was betrayal. Back at home, he sat at his desk with 2 swabs, 2 vials, and a trembling sense of purpose. Across town, Kerem did the same. They had agreed to take the test separately. No cameras, no lawyers, just science. One truth, 2 lives, and a countdown. Han sat alone in her office. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the test. She felt like a ghost watching her own trial, powerless, present, and guilty in ways no one could quite define. On her desk sat a letter she'd never sent, addressed to Elias, written the day he was born. "If someday you find out who he was, I hope you hate me a little less than I hate myself for keeping it from you." She never mailed it. She never even folded it. Now it stared back like a wound that refused to scar. Across the marble floors of a law firm built on secrets, Christina Marquez watched the chaos from a distance. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to lie, because she had already made her move. A phone call to an old contact at a private genetics lab in Istanbul. When the results arrive, "Send me both copies," she ordered. "I want to see who breaks first, the father, the son, or the mother." Days passed. Elias went about life like a man wearing clothes soaked in gasoline, knowing that, at any moment, someone might strike a match. Classes, coffee, numb conversation, but everything was static, until it wasn't. One morning, the envelope arrived. He didn't open it. He stared at it for hours. That same envelope had also arrived for Kerem. He held it, but didn't move, because when you've spent your whole life wondering if you're someone's father, a single sentence can feel like a death certificate or a resurrection. Elias finally opened it. One line in bold: "Probability of paternity, 99.98%, confirmed, biological father." He sat back. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He didn't move, because in that moment, he was no longer possibly anything. He was someone's son. Meanwhile, Christina poured herself a glass of wine and smiled. The truth had arrived. Now, all that remained was using it to burn someone. Truth isn't a gift, it's a key. And once you use it, you better be ready to open every door it unlocks. The truth is rarely loud, until someone puts a microphone in front of it. And once the world starts listening, Even honesty becomes a weapon. The meeting was meant to be private, no press, no drama, no sudden explosions, just Kerem and Elias, sitting across from each other for the first time, as father and son. Not maybe, not possibly, confirmed, but fate had other plans. And fate wore high heels and designer perfume. Christina Marquez watched from her office window as a young reporter rehearsed his lines outside. He held the printed DNA report in his hands, the one she leaked anonymously. Make sure you use the words hidden heir, she had told the producer, not illegitimate son. People love a fairy tale, not a scandal. The reporter nodded. And what about the mother? Christina smiled thinly. Just call her complicated. It'll do more damage than any accusation. Inside the quiet restaurant in Malaga, Kerem arrived early. He wore no tie. His eyes were calm, but watchful. He hadn't slept much. How could he? He was about to sit across from the boy he never raised, but had never stopped wondering about. Elias walked in 5 minutes late. No apologies. No hesitation. They shook hands, not like strangers, not like family, like two men who shared something too heavy for language. So it's true, Elias said first. Kerem nodded. I never doubted it, but I needed to be sure. For you? There was a long silence. Then, Elias asked the question he had rehearsed for days. Why didn't you fight for me? Kerem looked him in the eye. I never knew you existed until it was too late, and by the time I tried to come back, I had already been erased by my mother. Kerem paused, then shook his head slowly. By fear, hers, mine, everyone's. And now, I don't want to rewrite the past. I just want to see what you do with your future. Before Elias could respond, cameras flashed through the restaurant, window reporters, microphones, shouting. Someone had tipped them off. Someone had handed them the DNA test. And now the world wanted answers. Kerem stood. Come with me. They slipped through the back door and into a car waiting in the alley. It was a getaway, not from danger, but from a world that never lets two people have a moment without turning it into a headline. That evening, every news outlet carried the story. Spanish law student confirmed as heir to Turkish business empire, the hidden son of Kerem Aslan. The photo showed Elias mid-step caught between his father and the crowd. The world saw a headline. Elias saw a trap. Back in Seville. Hande watched it unfold on her screen. Alone. She knew who leaked it. Christina's fingerprints were always invisible, but unmistakable. Hande poured herself a glass of water, opened her drawer, and pulled out the one thing she swore never to use, a video recording, one that could destroy Christina or save them all. Sometimes the truth saves a life. Other times, it sells it to the highest bidder. And now, Elias doesn't just have a father, he has a spotlight, and in it, every secret burns hotter. Figure from Kerem's past, a brother who was thought to be dead, want to continue. A surname isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a curse, because when a name carries power, everyone wants to use it, own it, or destroy it. Elias woke up to chaos. His phone buzzed with hundreds of messages. Social media had exploded overnight. The lost son, the hidden heir, the silent scandal. He was everywhere. Talk shows speculated. Gossip blogs stalked him. Even classmates began to look at him with curiosity or calculation. His life was no longer his, all because of a surname, all because of Aslan. Kerem had retreated from the public eye. Temporarily, his lawyers handled the noise. The claims, the vultures, but Kerem was worried about something far worse than the press. A letter had arrived at his estate. No signature, just handwriting he hadn't seen in 20 years. One sentence, your brother didn't die, and he hasn't forgiven you. Yusuf, the brother presumed dad, the older son, the one who vanished during the earthquake in Istanbul, and who, apparently, was back, not to reconcile, but to take everything. Christina Marquez had never felt more powerful. Hande was weakened. Kerem was exposed. Elias was lost in the spotlight, and now, she had Yusuf Aslan, He had returned quietly, under a different name, older, colder, and hungrier than ever. Christina offered him what he needed: legal access, financial leverage, and a stage. In return, Yusuf would help her take down Kerem piece by piece, and if Elias got in the way, he would be neutralized. Meanwhile, Hande stormed into Christina's office. "No more games. You're using a man who faked his death to manipulate my son." Christina didn't flinch. "Correction. I'm helping a man who was erased by his own brother reclaim what's his. You don't care about him. No. I care about what he represents. Leverage. And leverage, dear Hande, is the only truth that wins in court. Touch Elias, and I'll bury you myself." Christina smiled, sipping her coffee. "You already tried, and I'm still standing." That same day, Elias walked through the Murillo Gardens, trying to breathe. He was stopped by a woman, older, kind, unfamiliar. "You're Elias, aren't you? Do I know you?" "No, but I knew Julian." He froze. "You knew him. We volunteered together. He always talked about you. Said he never got to be your father, but he never stopped hoping you'd learn the truth." She handed him an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter from Julian. "If Elias ever reads this, tell him I didn't leave because I didn't love him. I left because I was told to. I don't know if I'm his real father, but I would have protected him as if I were." Elias blinked back tears. The woman touched his arm gently. "Some fathers aren't born in blood, they're born in sacrifice." Then she walked away. That night, Kerem invited Elias to dinner, just the two of them. The conversation was awkward, quiet, but honest. Kerem said, "I won't ask you to carry my name, or my legacy." "You don't owe me anything," Elias replied. "I don't want your name because of inheritance. I want it because I've earned it, surviving everything it cost me." Kerem smiled, proud, tired, then "Welcome, son." But the next morning, Christina held a press conference. In front of dozens of cameras, she announced, "I represent Yusuf Aslan, the rightful co-founder and heir of the Aslan corporate legacy. And we are opening an official fraud investigation against Kerem Aslan for concealment of paternity and embezzlement of family wealth." The crowd gasped, and then Yusuf stepped into view. Alive. Standing beside Christina. Eyes full of war. Elias claimed his name, but names come with enemies, and when your bloodline carries both wealth and betrayal, your last name becomes your battlefield. There comes a moment when the son stops asking why they hid him, and starts asking what they raised him to become. If you raised him in silence, don't be surprised when he learns to break it with noise. From the moment Yusuf Aslan stood in front of the cameras beside Christina Marquez, everything changed. This was no longer about paternity. This was war. Legal documents were filed. Allegations of financial concealment, mismanagement, and fraud spread like wildfire. Kerem's name began to crumble under the pressure of suspicion. But the most dangerous blow wasn't legal. It was emotional. Elias watched the press conference from his phone in silence. Yusuf looked like him, just older, heavier, eyes full of something sharp. Not hate, worse, calculation. Beside him, Christina looked like victory in heels. And in that moment, Elias knew he was no longer being protected. He was being played. Kerem called an emergency meeting. Hande joined. 2 Turkish attorneys attended, via video. Christina submitted a claim that Yusuf's rights as co-founder were illegally removed when he was declared deceased. One of them explained, "They're arguing that Kerem took control of the Spanish assets unethically." "And what does that have to do with Elias?" Hande asked. "They're making it about legacy. They want to destroy Kerem's credibility by turning Elias into an illegitimate heir." Kerem's jaw tightened. "They're not after the company, they're after the memory," Hande whispered, "and they're going to use Elias to rewrite it." That night, Elias entered the room without knocking. "Don't protect me anymore," he told them. "You don't need to get involved." Kerem tried. "Yes, I do, because you all spent 20 years making choices I never had a say in. That ends now." He looked at them like a man. "If I carry this name, Then I'll defend it, but on my terms. Kerem nodded, slowly, because Elias Aslan had awakened. Meanwhile, Christina studied her next move. She didn't want a court victory. She wanted a moral collapse, and that meant breaking Hande. She called a contact at a private hospital in Seville. Decades-old medical records were requested. Hidden files, mental health documentation. One name appeared on a sealed record, Hande La Vega. Admitted, 2004. Diagnosis, postpartum depression. Duration, 3 weeks. Temporary legal guardianship of child, transferred to LoveInSilence. Christina smiled, because secrets like this don't just stain, they ruin. She leaked the report to a tabloid, with one headline request. When the mother left, documents revealed Hande Vega temporarily gave up her son due to psychiatric episodes. Within hours, it was everywhere. Photos of a young Hande entering a clinic. Words like unfit, unstable, abandonment. Elias saw it. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He simply packed a bag and left. Hande found out through her assistant. She collapsed into a chair, not from shock but from grief. Because Christina had crossed a line. And this time, it wasn't just war. It was personal. Christina toasted herself that evening, wine in hand, the world on mute. Why, Uf looked at her. You enjoy this? No, I savor it. You sure you want to go this far? She stared at the city lights. I already did. Elias is no longer the hidden child. He's the voice they all want to silence. And with each step he takes, he wakes new enemies. The most dangerous one wears heels and perfume. And she doesn't want revenge anymore. She wants blood. Sometimes the end doesn't come with a bang. It comes with a whisper you weren't supposed to hear, and a truth no one wanted you to survive. Elias hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Not Kerem, not Hande, not the press, not Noor. He had become a ghost in his own story, and maybe that was the only way to protect himself. Because when the world makes your name a headline, sometimes the only thing left to do is erase it. Christina wasn't celebrating this time. She had released the clinic report expecting a meltdown, a breakdown, a dramatic collapse, but what she got was worse. Silence. Not even public outrage, just distance. Cold, thick silence between a mother and son that spoke louder than any victory speech. That was real power, or so she thought. Why Uf sat in the shadows of his brother's ruin, watching it all with a kind of quiet hunger. But power, he was learning, came with a cost. Because Elias hadn't crumbled. He was watching. And he had started asking questions. That's what led Elias to an old nursing home on the outskirts of Malaga. He had tracked down someone who hadn't spoken in years. Teresa Ortega. She had once worked at the hospital where LoveInSilence died. She remembered everything. And before she passed away a month ago, she left a video, not for Hande, not for Kerem, for Elias. In it, she said, they lied to you, but not the way you think. Julian, he knew the truth, and he recorded it the night before he died. Teresa had saved the tape, hidden it for years, out of fear. Now, it belonged to Elias. The video played in a small, dusty projector room. Grainy footage, a pale face, Julian, dying, speaking softly. If you're watching this, Elias, then I'm already gone. I'm not your father. But I was willing to be, because Kerem was gone, and your mother was broken, and I loved you both. But here's what no one will tell you. Christina knew. She knew Kerem was your father. She destroyed the letter that could have brought him back. She made Hande believe that silence was mercy. She made a decision for all of us. And that's what really broke your family. Elias froze. Christina hadn't just twisted the truth. She had built the lie. He didn't call anyone. He didn't release the tape. He went to Christina. Her office. No appointment, no security. She looked up, surprised. Come to thank me for making you famous. He sat down. No. To end it, he placed a USB on her desk. Play it, or I will. She stared at the drive. Her hand didn't move, because for the first time, she looked afraid. That night, the video was leaked anonymously. Not to the press, not to the public. To Elias's followers. And from there, it spread like fire. Not as scandal, but as a warning. a reckoning. Christina stepped down from the firm 3 days later. No statement, no camera, just silence. Her own weapon, finally turned against her. Yusuf disappeared again. No trace, no exit. Like a shadow melting into itself. He had tried to claim a legacy, but it had never been his, because power without truth crumbles. Hande and Elias met on a Sunday. She waited on the bench where she once read him fairy tales as a child. He came. They didn't talk about the past, only the future. Will you forgive me someday? She asked. No, he said, but I'll walk beside you anyway. She nodded, tears in her throat, because forgiveness wasn't the point. He had chosen to stay. Kerem never asked for a second chance, but Elias gave it to him anyway, not as father and son, but as two men who survived the same silence. Final scene, years later, a university exhibition, a structure of stone, glass, and rusted iron, an architectural metaphor. The title, Ashes That Grew Roots. Designer, İlyas Begaslan. In the description plaque, this work is dedicated to those who survived, not by speaking loudly, but by living truthfully after everyone else had lied. The room falls silent, not out of sadness, but respect, because the boy who was hidden is no longer anyone's secret. The end.